you
Mm-hmm.
for being one of our persuaders and someone we can trust their opinion on. So I'll drop down. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. James, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Sergey says for me to focus my thoughts, and SJV says to talk a little slower. So which is great because I'm going to talk about stress and lowering stress. I think SJV marked it how we should be doing this. We should be lowering our stress. I'm going to tell you a couple reasons why. Number one, stress ages you, right? So you want to eliminate it in your life. But number two, I was one of the guys that said the deadly vax in 2021 got censored just like everybody else, you know. I wrote 11 articles about it personally. I could have wrote 1,000, you know, but I just could have saved millions of lives. But, you know, Google and Apple and all and Twitter and everybody conspired to make sure you didn't see the truth. But long story short, there's something called spike proteins, and when your body, your cells die off and come back, they don't have them anymore, right? But your heart and your brain regenerate way slower than the rest of your body. So you kind of need to be like for about 5 years. You're gonna be taking vacation. I'm sorry to tell you, all you guys, you better be taking some vacation for the next couple of years, right? Lower your society stress and all that stuff. But you know, whatever you can do, right? So there's a song by Green Day, you know, it's called Holiday. Now this is back during the Bush administration and stuff. We're talking about what if we just don't go to the war? You know, it's just said in another way, you know. And it says once you realize everybody else is going crazy around you, like you don't need to be a part of them and try and stop them. You're like, hey, what I'll go kick a rock around the park, you know? What if I go do whatever I want to do and not march to your drum, right? So Sergey is is Buddhist. I'm not, but I do appreciate emptying your mind. When you empty your mind, well, you don't have to think about how much we're gonna go schedule stuff. You know, you gotta schedule stuff. Oh, I gotta go this weekend. I gotta do this. This weekend I gotta do this. So the whole week you're thinking I gotta do that. That's a process in your brain that you could just wrote that down or used your house for spatial memory. You know, write a big note on your wall or something. Put it on the floor, something you would know. Okay, so it's not on your brain, right? As a video gamer and a Carnegie Mellon University grad, we studied how the brain works like a computer. So if you have stuff on your processes, you have about 6 processes, and you probably don't want to use them all at once. You want to deliberately not multitask. You want to go around and just be like, think one thing at a time. You're going to go to the store, pick one thing up. Don't go write a big list, you know. By the time you make a big list, you could have just been there and back or pick stuff up along the way. You know, it's consumables. You have to pick them up again eventually later, you know. So you got like lowering stress is huge. Empty the brain of all the things you can, and when you empty the brain of all the things you're thinking about, then you can look around you. Believe it or not, your own perception, your own eyesight, your ability to take in beauty and and react to other people is lowered when you're multitasking. You know, you ever see someone juggle? You see someone juggling a bunch of bowling ball pins and chainsaws. You think they really want to be you to throw them a softball at full speed at them? No, they'll be like, "What the hell?" and they'll drop it all, right? So when you multitask, and a lot of people think multitasking is great. I mean, some of you get really good at it. While you're doing your office, while the radio's playing, while something's downloading, and the stove's on, and you can handle that. But someone walks in and goes, "Hey, can you mop the floor?" You're like, "I can't do anything." And the person just loses it. It's like the juggler who was juggling too much and you got one more thing on you. So as SJV says, you know, you lower that mind, meditate, and when you have nothing on, someone goes, "Can you mop the floor?" Like, "Why, yes, I can." You know, you're like a more chill ability to react to people by deliberately lowering yourself, right? So you live longer by having lower stress, and also the Bible says sin kills. Now, this is the idea that like Moses, Caleb, and Joshua were 80 years old, but had like the bodies of a 20-year-old. This is basically what they said. And I think so. While absorbing hate and not lashing back out is very stressful. When people are yelling, yeah, you basically I think it's called trauma dumping these days. Or people get hurt, and like kids get hurt in school when they go kick their dog at home. You can't lash back out and hate. So even though the stress hit, I believe it'll help you live longer because you're not sinning yourself. So at the end of the day, it's just us and God. Our doctors and nurses can't help us to stop us from dying. Our friends and family can't help us step to the other side. Our boss or co-workers are best confident. None of us can help us when we're done for. But being meditative, thankful for nature, thankful for life, thankful for the rivers, mountains, pine trees, dandelions, chrysanthemums, finding hawk feathers on a walk or seeing deer or the bluegill fish. I think it's the mindset we should all be in, because more often we should be in the presence of the Creator, being thankful. When we have all that stuff on our mind, we can't be observant and see the stuff around us. As SJV says, it's very important to be meditative. Take that stuff off your brain. More than we should be advancing our own agendas or building the house deck, thinking of going to school, changing jobs, or 10 useless schedules in front of us. We clear our minds now. We know it's not about our own status in society. We just want to be one with our Maker and Savior, and we're, I think you can tell I'm reading from a thing that I made up just when I was getting along. And we're self-satisfied as a creation, and we can remain observant for cool things happening and people around us needing help. It's a very low-stress way of living, and you live longer with less stress, right? So, like I said, especially with COVID, and a lot of people got this COVID shot. When you're lower stress, it lowers the stress of those around you. We need that for a couple years, or the heart and the brain is going to have some issues with, with society and stuff. So, thank you for letting me talk. Thank you, Sergey, for telling me to focus on one subject. I went with stress, right? Thank you, SJV, for telling me to slow down my talk. And I will pass the mic up.
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think there's some good techniques in there about lowering stress. Have you read the book, or are you familiar with the Getting Things Done method by David Allen?
No, I'm not.
It's a great method it's kind of like a to-do list sort of thing, but it's essentially what you were just describing about emptying your mind and putting it all on paper. It just goes into a lot more specifics about a particular format and exactly what you should write down and how you should structure it. And then, it puts it in a way where you can easily go back to it and figure out what you need to do next. And I think it falls right in line with what you're saying about not really multitasking, because really I don't think multitasking is real. I think you might think you're multitasking, but really you're just constantly switching between multiple things, and it's not really efficient, and it creates a lot more brain stress, and it's difficult to focus when you do that. And maybe that's more true for men than women. I know there's been the stereotype that women are better at multitasking, but I tend to think it might just mean that they're less able to just shut things out that would allow them to focus on one thing than men are. But I think they probably have the same issues with trying to multitask if they're trying to do multiple things at the same time.
Didn't they
You
say,
can't really do that.
So they say about multitasking that it's just you're doing two things badly. But yeah, I'm a to-do list master. In fact, you can shift your brain to programming by just managing your to-do list. But I don't want to bogart the whole conversation. I'll talk about to-do lists next time. I'm really, really, really good at to-do lists.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you to look into the Getting Things Done method, because it's the most effective system I've used in the past for managing to-do lists, where the essential nature of it is, number one, to do exactly what you were saying, which is to just empty your mind by putting everything on paper. Like, just dump everything, like all the things that you're trying to keep track of that you need to do, just get it into a trusted system that you can go back to, and it's always going to be there for you, and get it all in one place. And then from there, it has you categorize it, and the way it recommends categorizing it is by context. And what they mean by context is, like, where do you need to be when you do these things? So there's a certain set of tasks you might need to do when you're home. There might be a certain set of tasks you need to be online or on a computer. There might be some where you have to do it out when you're doing errands or when you're at work. And so if you can group them all by those contexts, then you can naturally just turn to that page when you get to that place, and you know what you need to do in that place. And there may be some catch-all for, I can do this anywhere, but for the most part, you can group it into where you're expecting to do that task. And so that focuses you right away on saying, okay, I'm at home now, or I'm online now, I'm going to do those tasks. And you can kind of batch them up and get them all done when you have all the tools that you need to do those tasks. And the other thing it recommends is using only the next physical action is what you write down. So a lot of times you might have a task that's really a project, meaning multiple tasks that lead to a goal. That's how he defines a project. And he's saying you don't write down all the tasks for the project from start to finish, and you don't write down the project itself. You only write down the next physical action that you have to take. So do you need to open a book, or do you need to research a topic, or do you need to download an email, or do you need to do, some physical task? And he basically says that's all you really need, because once you do that task, you'll naturally know what the next task is. And if you have time, you might continue down that path and just keep doing multiple tasks and go all the way to your goal. Or if you don't, you can at least just say, okay, now I know what the next action is, so I can put that in my planner or whatever form you're keeping this information in, and you know exactly where you left off and what you need to physically do next. And I think that's a pretty effective strategy as well. He calls that like a natural planning method, where you don't really need a plan start to finish. He says there obviously are situations where you need like a project plan, but those will basically be obvious to you. If you have something at work where you have to plan things out all the way to the end, then you'll know that you have to do that. But a lot of what you do on a daily basis doesn't really fall in that category. It's more like you just need to know what you need to do next, and then that logically follows to the next step until you're done. And that's all you really ever need to keep track of, is that next action. And I think that works really well too. So those are the basics of it. But I think in my experience, it also works better to use actual paper as opposed to some kind of online tool. And that's just been my personal experience. He talks about it kind of tool agnostic, where he's like, if you like the electronic tools, you can use those. And he has some specific recommendations about things. And there's other companies that have tailored this to things like Outlook or all the various to-do apps that you have on phones and things. But I found that those don't work very well for me, just because you can only display, let's say, maybe 10 or 15 items at one time. And you have to start scrolling then to see the rest. And that makes it a lot harder to just pick out, okay, what's the actual next thing I want to do? And I find with a piece of paper, like I use a Moleskine notebook when I've done this, that can easily fit at least 30 or even 50 tasks or items. And then you just have pretty much everything at one glance, and you can just say, okay, I can see everything that I need to do, and I can naturally just pick out, this is the thing I'm going to do next. And you don't have to scroll, you don't have to turn the page, you don't have to think about, what did I see on the other screen. So it seems to work a lot better to me to have an actual physical notebook where I keep all these things, just so I can see everything at a glance, as opposed to having to scroll back and forth and deal with limitations on screens. So that's what's worked for me. But I agree that it's a great technique for lowering stress, because I think if you do this, I think you'll see the experience you'll have is this sense of relief, where as soon as all your thoughts are on paper, you can just release all those thoughts. And you're not trying to keep it active in your brain, because that's what you're doing when you're trying to keep track of a bunch of tasks, is you're trying to make sure you don't forget. And you will forget probably half of them, but you're trying not to. And so you're expending mental energy constantly. And when you get it all on paper and you have it in a system that you trust, that you're going to be able to go back to anytime you need it, then you don't have to think about it anymore. And you can just kind of relax. And that's the physical experience I have when I do that. Once I dump everything on paper, I can just relax, and I don't have to worry about remembering things, because I know where it is, and I don't have to try and think about it anymore. And I think that's the probably the biggest benefit I've seen from it, is that it just totally lets you relax and be present in the moment. And that leads to another book, The Power of Now, which is Eckhart Tolle, I think, is the author. And he's written a bunch of other books like that. But I think the whole point of that boils down to, when you can be present in the moment, you're a lot more at peace. And I think you mentioned, or someone mentioned, how like the past isn't real and the future isn't real, and that's kind of the point that Eckhart Tolle tries to make. And whether or not you believe that's true or not, it doesn't matter. I think the reality is that most people would experience is that if you can just be present in the moment and not be focusing on the future or focusing on the past, then you typically don't really have any problems. Like, a problem might relate to something in the future where you're worried about something that might happen, but it's not real because it hasn't happened. And anything in the past is gone now. You can't go back to the past and change anything. So it's really just, past history. And Scott has made the argument that you can kind of treat it like you were just dropped on the earth and in like a video game setting, and that you just have whatever you have. And that's actually a lot more freeing too, because you can say, okay, I can't do anything about the past, so there's no reason to worry about it. And I can't really do anything about the future, so there's no reason to worry about that either. All I need to worry about is where I am right now and what I need to do right now. And that limits you in many ways, but I think it frees you in a lot of ways to say, I just don't have to worry about any of that other stuff. And I think that's another great technique for lowering stress. So I agree with all those things you said.
I agree with most what you said, and I just want to say one little thing. Like you said, if you feel like you just dropped in earth, sometimes that's the best way to do it in relationships too. Like I'm predating some really fine women, hotter than I've ever seen in my life, right? You can predate as many people as you want. You know, you're not married to them. But what happens is I might make a misstep, right? It's not the end of the road, but I might think it's the end of the road. And what I do is I just pretend like, hey, I've dropped on the road. I'll just talk to her like a normal human being again, And that goes for all relationships, family, friends. Maybe sometimes the best thing to do in a big argument is just don't bring it up. Just don't, don't make one argument to like 500, and we're just talking about absorbing hate. It doesn't feel good, but sometimes the best thing to do is to, if you treat your relationships like, hey, forgiveness and it restarted today, then that's a good way of looking at it too. And I'll talk about to-do list next, but I don't want to bogart the conversation.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's go to Zap and then Edward.
Hey everybody.
Hi.
We talked on Thanksgiving and we briefly about gratitude and how they tie to affirmations. And I was thinking about that too, really kind of like all of the different Robert Cialdini things. And Scott always mentions too about just being useful. And, how reciprocity fits into that same sort of category. And I was sort of just toying with the idea of like algorithms versus protocols, where, these things, reciprocity, gratitude, and they create conditions. And it's sort of like against the standard operating system, like regular human OS, where algorithms kind of dictate behavior, protocols kind of, create conditions. And just wanted to sort of pull the thread on that a little bit and what else is there? Because it's sort of like, you ever listen to David Foster Wallace's This Is Water, just the basic awareness, and it's like hard for all of us to do it because we're always in chatterbrain. And some of these things that Scott teaches us are, more like protocols, and they create the environment for you versus sort of dictate behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So that's all. Just wanted to sort of explore that a little bit. I guess get it out loud. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to me, a protocol is just kind of the rules you're supposed to follow for something, and an algorithm would be more like the method you follow for something. And I know they are kind of complementary in many ways, at least in computer terms, but, probably in terms of humans as well, because I think there's a lot of parallels.
Sure. Cool.
All right.
Well, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Edward, go ahead.
Thanks, Owen. James, I just wanted to respond to something you said about lowering stress and letting beauty in. I'm 100% on that. I feel like there's a lot of beauty that people don't see. I know that's kind of maybe just a perception thing, and then there's obviously a lot of time, and I don't know, maybe there's mental states here. I just maybe point out that it also lets persuasion in. If you let the world in, it also lets the rest of the world in, So I guess there's just a general question, like how do you have the filters to figure out what you want to let in and what you want to let out, to recognize beauty, which could be you, us, or just me, right? So, I mean, I think we all have sort of that there. I'm just trying to, this is sort of a question that I had that popped up when I heard that. Just an observation, I think a lot of people here are maybe very tech focused, and that's myself as well. And I would just like to maybe congratulate the people that are tech focused on being able to communicate and be tech focused, which is, I think, a skill stack that not a lot of tech focused people have. I just thought that was maybe worth calling out. And you guys were talking about multitasking. I maybe wanted to point out that multitasking might be bad, but I had to do it to try to revise my thoughts, to try to say something useful while I was trying to still listen to the conversation, right? Like I didn't want to just, just take over and have nothing to say. I just, I just thought as you were talking about that, I was like, well, I'm doing it right now. Just sort of a thing. I've got maybe one or two smaller thoughts that maybe people can jump off of, but we were talking about the predictive value of asking questions earlier, or just asking questions. And, we've obviously got a few sort of high-profile people that do very well in this space, and Scott Adams is kind of one of them. Where basically you never really need to disagree. It's never 100%. like I love that there's no, we're just expanding the dialogue, and I have no problem with that. But I'm trying to figure out the difference between what Scott Adams does and maybe what other people do. And it feels substantially different, and I'm having trouble putting it into words. Like, I know it works, and I know, I trust hearing it from Scott Adams. Maybe that's my own bias. But I also hear it from other podcasters now that I'm sort of aware of it. And I'm like, well, it feels like it falls a little flat. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a tell that I can figure out what that actually means? Like, I feel like you went, and maybe that's the idea of a predictive value. You see it enough that it doesn't come true enough that you're like, well, maybe I'm just gonna disassociate a little bit with this. Maybe it goes a little bit further down on my trust radar than other people that don't seem to draw as hard of a line. I just wanted to credit Scott Adams with that, because that's something that I feel like I learned out of it. I listen to way more podcasts or whatever that I disagree with than the ones I agree with, just to see what's up. I think that's something you mentioned as well, Owen. And it's not just to battle, it's just to self-calibrate, and then to be able to have that communication, right? So, and I think you also brought this up. I just maybe wanted to mention that's one of the biggest things that I miss from Charlie Kirk. I didn't listen to him a lot because I genuinely understood what he was saying, but I really loved that he was bridging the gap between two bubbles. And other than, obviously he's a human being and a lot of other beautiful things. Like, I feel like that's one of the things that we miss a lot is that. So, anyways, there's a bunch of stuff to jump off of in there. I've got a few other ideas, but I'll leave it there for now. And
well, definitely, I think Charlie Kirk had a very good style of asking questions, and I think part of the reason it worked is that he was very sincere with the types of questions he would ask. Like, he wasn't trying to trick somebody. There's a lot of people that might use those types of questions to say, oh, I'm going to try and get a gotcha moment. And I think if you really listen to some of the Charlie Kirk conversations, he wasn't doing that. He was being very transparent and open about the types of questions he was asking, and he was just really trying to engage with people and trying to really hear their opinions on things. And I never sensed that he was asking some kind of gotcha question. He might disagree with somebody at a certain point in the conversation, but I think it was a lot of the questions he would ask would be just exploring, like, okay, what do you really think about this? Or what do you really know about this? And, what is your understanding of this issue? And so he would be just calibrating and getting his own understanding of the other person's point of view and the other person's frame of reference, so that then they could have a conversation based on that. And so I think he had a very genuine style of engagement that I think is kind of rare in a lot of these adversarial sorts of contexts that we find ourselves in a lot of the time. And, I think most people can tell the difference if you really look at it. Like, if you look at the average interaction on Twitter or on X, like, yeah, you can see when someone's being sincere and they're really trying to engage with somebody, or when they're just trying to catch you in some gotcha moment or prove you wrong, or push their agenda or push their point of view. There's a very different style to it, and even if they're both asking questions, it's very different, the types of questions they ask and how they word them. And, you can kind of tell the difference. And I often can sense, like, okay, if somebody asks me a question, I can tell whether they're, really the question is pushing a particular narrative, or whether they're really just asking for information, genuinely. There's a very different style to it. And so I think that's very important to suss out when you're interacting with someone.
Speaking of questions,
Appreciate it.
did Ed, was that question directed at me, Ed? I didn't want to cut you off. I was waiting for a pause. Did you want me to answer that question about how do I keep myself from being persuaded?
I think it was a general question, and I'd love to hear your response to it. I also just wanted to maybe call out for people that are not as, they haven't gone up to the speaker role or anything like that. Maybe it's a little weird. I just wanted to say that if you have something to say, it doesn't have to be very long. Write it down. Don't be embarrassed. I think Scott Adams talks about, like, basically the idea that, embarrassment is probably a way to grow. This is a bit new for me as well. So I just, if you have an input you think is interesting, throw it out there, and you can tell. And as SJV says, man, listen to it again later and see how you do. It's kind of a growth experience too.
Yeah, I agree with all that. James, did you want to respond?
Oh yeah, I got a little good one too. How do I keep myself from being persuaded? Well, like you guys study this, you know it's important not to be con job in that. But to me, I like some whimsiness in life sometimes. Like speed reading, I got good at speed reading, and then I'm great at reading text specs, but it doesn't let you enjoy a good book. You have to slow down, read some Tolkien. It gives you bad habits, right? And if you know how to make movies, like I'm a game designer, game programmer, what happens? You start to see the tropes, the spoilers before you see it unfold in the movie. You're like, oh, I saw that coming a mile away because you're a movie maker. Like Owen says, he can see someone trying to influence what they're doing, pushing an agenda. You start to see that. So if you speed read or understand movies, you start to lose a little bit of the magic of life, right? You know. So I don't read the persuasion books too much. I don't want to know some stuff on purpose, but I like to know some. So when I'm out and about, I do what Jesus says, just do what they tell me to do. So I'm basically a tool bag. People ask me to do stuff, I do it for them. I can lose a day for a person. I can lose weeks. And then all of a sudden, then I'm back to myself at home programming where I want to be. I call that the tunnel pull. Everybody should understand there's something called a tunnel pull. You got to do this, you got to do that, got to go to work, got to pick that up, got to do that. And it's going to be like maybe a week before you can be yourself. And when you guide your life, you want to guide it so you don't got a lot of tunnel pulls in your life. You want to be able to have more autonomy in your life. So yes, I don't really prevent myself from being prevent myself from being persuaded. I end up just doing everything people ask me to do to help them out in their life because they need their help. They wouldn't ask me if they didn't need help. But when I want to be like really enjoy nature, I probably don't want other people around me. Right? I guess I'm not a loner. I like people, but I end up being a tool bag. That's
Okay, thanks. All right, Sergio?
Hey, thank you, Owen. Before I forget, James, your sound is a little bit echoey. You know, it's check with Owen. Try to get the microphone to Owen. I don't recommend mine. Get SJV's or Owen's to make your voice sound better. Okay, that's it. And as far as persuasion, we are always going to be persuaded by the people that surround us, or the people that will listen, even if they're not around us, right? The people that will listen the most, we're going to become them, right? When SJV said, oh, Sergio, that I have improved because of you, SJV too, because you are the one, Trump, Scott, Owen, and JLP are the 5 people that I listen the most. Not is because it's true, right? It's like I know exactly how much time I'm spending listening to everybody in 1 week, and I know that for a fact that those are the 5 people that I listen to the most. So I am becoming more and more like them, all 5 of you, right? So I'm becoming JLP, showing me how to be at peace. Trump shows me how to win. Scott shows me how to persuade. You, Owen, you show me the common sense of like not be crazy, man. I mean, because I go nuts sometimes with my theories, and you help me keep it grounded. You know, so when James is saying that we cannot be why do you want to not be persuaded? I do want to be persuaded by people that I chose to persuade me, basically. So it's impossible not to be persuaded. If you think that you cannot be persuaded, you are not even in the game at that point. So that's it. And great advice that you gave, Owen, on writing those tasks and get it out of your head. Because if it's in your head, it's going to be it's going to be always a problem, right? It's going to be affecting you. And you put it down and you go. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate all that. And earlier you were saying about the audio. I would just mention I use AirPods most of the time, and that's what I'm speaking on right now. So if anybody wants to use AirPods for this sort of context, it seems to work pretty well. I will say, like, over time at least, you might run out after a few hours with battery, but it's pretty easy to switch from one AirPod to another, which is typically what I do at that point. It works pretty well too. But I do have a higher end microphone, but I don't use it because it just would keep me in one spot. And I actually like to pace while I'm talking. So I'm constantly walking around as I'm talking to all of you. I just feel better that way. But yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate all your feedback and all your contributions too. Thanks.
Yeah, the microphone sounds great. I didn't know there was AirPods, so I'm glad that it's AirPods. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. All right, SJV.
First, the microphone I use it's like Fine, I think the name of it, and it works pretty good. I've been considering updating to one of those Shure microphones, but if this works good, I don't want to spend the extra money. I wanted to comment on the meditation earlier, because you may have noticed as soon as I said that word, I was like, I may need to define this, and I did it, I think, in the subscriber space, but not in here. If you're trying to meditate and you're wondering if you're doing it right, that means you're doing it wrong. And meditation is kind of like reframes. It doesn't matter if you're doing it right or doing it wrong. If it works for you, it's good. I'll give you a few examples of meditation. One of the advices I give is, if you don't know what to do, just go sit down in a chair and do nothing. Eventually, you'll go, I need to be doing this. Well, then go do that and then come back to your chair. Another example, if you don't know what to do, go make your bed. Don't worry about doing anything else, just go make your bed. And then same thing, move on to the next small thing. I think Owen kind of described it as that. Another example is take your dog for a sniff. You know, and people might argue, is this meditation? It doesn't matter. It's just like reframes. If it works for you, do it. I don't care what you call it. I just got, as soon as I used that word, I was like, these people are going to think, picture me as the Buddha or something. Whatever works for you, do it. If it works, it doesn't matter if it's labeled meditation or whatever. So,
I'm pretty sure that's what Buddha said, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it is. So, we could get into a lot of Buddha, but I didn't come here to talk Buddhism, but I just didn't want to give everybody the impression that, oh, look at him, he's out sitting in the grass under a tree with his legs crossed all day. So,
It's Christian meditation too, my bro, man. Like, it's like, I understood what you said, but like, I guess I might have given extra vibes too to that stereotype and stuff. But like, yeah, it's turning your brain off, man, and just doing your life. And like, while you're saying, you know, make your bed, I'm over there cleaning my room with my brain off. So I love the vibes, man.
Yeah, I'm just joking with the SJV, but I think what I recall Buddha saying is one of the more meta things that he said is just to use what works and leave behind the rest. All right, let's go to Billy.
That reminded me of the saying, do your best and forget the rest, is the guy that does P90X. If anyone's into P90X workouts. But anyway, the king of multitasking is Scott. Sometimes the way he reads the comments and talks about comments and also talks to his show at the same time, I think is pretty impressive when he does that. It's like, how can you read all those comments when you're doing your show? Or there's so many comments flying by. But he's also the king of being able to focus and cranking out, multiple comics per day, every day for years is just incredible. So that's really impressive. The one comment I want to make, though, Edward, I think a tell that attracts, that I know it's different from Scott, and because we've had this longest break ever without Scott doing his show, is, lets you maybe see what you're missing sometimes. But one of his tells, I think, and one of the difference, I'm also like Edward, I consume probably way too much podcasts on both sides. And the fact that I'll say, like, And this is great, I'm just realizing this, and you're making me think about this as, it's really a one-way medium, and so you get potentially this documentary effect, even though I try to listen to, debate type formats where you listen to both sides. But Scott does a good thing, I noticed the other day, where he'll pause and, he'll ask the audience what they think and, solicit, our feedback. And, and so that's really different the way it does pause you to think, make a guess, 25%, right, on what, so the way he interacts with his audience live is certainly a different thing than a lot of the other podcasts we consume. And so like this show, it's very different as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I definitely think Scott's interactive style is pretty unique as far as the podcasters go. You don't see that on Joe Rogan. You don't see that on most other podcasts where they're just more broadcasting something, and they might be having a conversation with some other person that's part of the podcast, but they're typically not interacting with the audience or looking at comments and reacting to them and things like that. So I do think that's one of the more unique elements of what Scott does with his audience. And I think, that's where I kind of picked up on, well, the one thing missing from that, in my opinion, is people to actually be able to talk back to Scott or to have their part of the conversation. And I understand there is comments, and that's, some method of that, but I think it is somewhat limited in terms of being able to have a more at length comment or, expression of your point of view. And Scott can only look at a comment for, half a second before it scrolls by. So today he was saying he can only see 2 words at a time. So, it is somewhat constrained by the medium. So that's one of the reasons why I did this after party spaces, is to let people just have their say.
Something came to mind while Scott was saying that. If y'all are in locals, when he says that, everybody just try to stop commenting and just let a few people comment. It might help Scott out.
Mm-hmm. All right, James?
Sorry, I moved away from my computer. I have many headphones, many microphones, but this might sound crazy, but RF radiation, like if you're near like a cell phone tower, you can do this experiment yourself. Put your cell phone so there's a line between your cell phone and the cell phone tower, and download a big program or watch YouTube. I tend to get tinnitus doing that experiment, so I think there is some problems with RF radiation. So while I have some nice headsets, I'm trying to use a webcam right now. I'm sorry if my quality's low. I lowered my reverberation down. So I was just going to say, when it comes to the to-do list, that's what we were talking about earlier. Naturally, when you want to get stuff off your mind to lower your stress so you live longer, like if you don't multitask, you actually get more stuff done in your life because you live longer, right? And it feels better. You get more life to your years too because you have less stress. So as a programmer, a computer programmer, a lot of computer programmers say, I can't get into code mode, and it'll drive you nuts because you want to program but you can't. But if you have that to-do list and you manage it, well, all of a sudden you start moving your task around like, oh, I can do that little task. Then you start doing that task, and all of a sudden you're in code mode and doing stuff. I believe it was Bruce Lee who says you can't get anything done just by thinking about it. You have to apply yourself, and when you go, like ideas, go to your office or go to the kicking bag and just start going at it. Or you start programming or putzing around, and you do it. And a lot of people don't know you can putz around programming. You have to be in that code mode. So it's all or nothing. It's like the first step of 1,000 journey. You can't get that first step done because you're a programmer, and it's so hard to program, harder than rocket science. But if you start coming at it like this, I'm just going to manage my to-do list. You start moving little tasks around, and and you said just take the one step. Well, what I do is I put the whole task, and I get the first step below it, like sub-points, and then all the sub-points are there. And then if the sub-point I can't do, I'll sub-point the sub-point just to do the next task, right? And it ends up, you'll be fine stuff. Oh, I want to do that. Whether it's small or big, you're contributing to the project. So those to-do lists, they're absolutely amazing. I have a bunch of things on my YouTube and Rumble about the Seinfeld method, the Lucas method, the Spielberg method. They wrote movies because they dumped all their ideas into the to-do list, like creativity buckets. It's always rating creativity. If you don't write that idea down on your phone, on a piece of paper, you'll never have it. It'll go away. You'll forget all your ideas. There's all these funny things that happen. You hang out with some creative people, your best friends. You tell some jokes that probably no one else is telling. Well, no one's gonna hear that joke. It's the sound of silence from Simon and Garfunkel. I believe that song's about if you don't show the world your creativity, no one gets to hear it, right? So the idea is it's raining creativity. It's always raining creativity. You always raining creativity down. But if you don't write it down, it's gone. That's the power of to-do list, and it gets you moving. Like I said, I believe even non-programmers might be, oh, you know what? I want to do the deck. I want to arrange this. Like you said, Owen uses paper. I like paper. It feels more cerebral. But it's more easy to arrange stuff when you just open up Notepad, Make sure you back it up online. But the idea is, like, if I'm programming and I get my stuff done programming, I tell myself my to-do list is my favorite thing. And when I internalize that my to-do list is my favorite thing, I'm going back to it instead of the TV, instead of the doom scrolling. You can actually identify when you're doom scrolling sometimes, but then you get so mad you want to tell people how it is, right? I want to tell you how it is. I want to tell it how it is. And if you just start yelling like online, you can get arguments. You make yourself look bad, even if you're a nice person, if you argument hard online. So if you notice yourself doom scrolling, no, my to-do list is my favorite thing. Oh, I'm watching too many, I'm binging a TV series. No, my to-do list is my favorite thing. And then all of a sudden, you become a productive individual. Like SJV says, you can meditate while you do your work, right? Instead of being ticked off with the world and no one sees it, like, we got to save freedom and everything, and you're yelling, how loud is the yell going to be, right? You're doom scrolling, you're yelling to yourself, right? Cut out of that. Build your own life around. People will see your life as positive. You have more autonomy to be able to help those around you. Build that deck if that's what you want to do. Clean your house. I mean, you can mow the grass. You can build that thing you want to build, or you can learn stuff on YouTube. But you want to do that on your to-do list. Have everything you want to do on your to-do list. It's your life of dreams. It's your to-do list. It should be your favorite thing. Keep going back to it.
All right, thanks. I think those are good tips.
Conclusion.
And yeah, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, one other thing that I've heard as an effective way to get started after you stop a programming session or something is to leave like a line of code half unfinished, where the next step is obvious, but you don't actually finish it. And that's kind of counterintuitive because I think a lot of people would feel like, well, I want to just finish this task. I don't want to leave it undone. But I think the magic of doing that is that you know exactly where you left off. You kind of naturally fall right back into what you were doing the last time. And you also know exactly what to do as the first step. And that gets you moving to the point you were making where you're already programming. You're already doing it now. And you can just continue down that path. And it gives you that first step that's very obvious to just get you started. And I think that's essentially the same idea that David Allen was trying to put into the getting things done thing, is by just saying the next physical task, like, do I need to open a book? Do I need to open my computer? Do I need to read an email or whatever it is, as the very next thing you need to do? As long as you define what that is, then it's very obvious. You don't have to think about it. You just go do that thing. And then from there, it's just very natural to keep going. So I think that also harkens back to the thing Scott has said in his books about, if you're trying to get motivated, just move your pinky. Just get one little thing moving and then you can get started. And that's probably a similar idea to what Sergio was saying, which I think is a reference to Jordan Peterson about cleaning your room. Just a very basic thing. It's easy. You don't have to think about it. It's not hard to figure out what you need to do, but it's something you can do. And it's something that's achievable, and it's, something that would get you moving in the right direction. And then once you're moving in the right direction, it's a lot easier to keep going. So I think all those things kind of fit together.
Thank you.
It's funny you mentioned that because I did exactly the opposite. If it was 4:30 at the end of the day and I'm like, just finish something up, I was going home. It didn't matter. Quitting time was 5 o'clock. I wasn't going to get my brain locked in on something else. And it didn't matter if it was 5:30 or whatever. I'd just work until I found a logical stopping point, and then I was gone. It didn't matter if I left early, late, whatever. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. James, did you have something else?
I wanted to say I'm sorry if I talked over you. I put my volume down a little too low during that session. But yeah, just a little extra just here. In my game Starfighter General, there's actually a race of rat people, and they have a negative connotation that if they start a project, they can't stop until they finish. It's actually, just a little trope to make the guy more interesting. So yeah, I'm more on the SJV side. I like to get stuff done completely. Then when I come at it, come at something else or know where I'm looking at on my to-do list, I don't. I couldn't. I mean, I could handle. I mean, maybe it's training for OCD people to like leave stuff undone. You know how like you're supposed to confront your fears, like vertigo. You go to like a little bit of a high place, or you know, I'm not going to start talking about fears because some of that stuff's creepy. But like you know, long story short, you're supposed to confront it. So if you have OCD, maybe you should leave some tasks undone just to practice it. But I like to get stuff done. I'm a completionist too.
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to what SJV said about just see what works for you and, you know, use what works and leave the rest. Because I think a lot of these are things that are up to personal style and what works well for you. I mean, I think for some people it probably would work really well to say I'm going to leave, you know, a line of code that's only half written, or I know what I need to do next, but I'm just not going to do it right now. And then that might even motivate you to finish it and motivate you to get started in the next session. But it might also just give you that easy task where you can just say, okay, I'm moving, I'm doing the right, you know, moving in the right direction to get you in motion, essentially, rather than trying to start from scratch and say, how do I get started? I don't even know where to start. You know exactly where to start. You got the stopping point, you've got the placeholder right in the right spot to say, okay, I know exactly where I need to start and I know exactly what I need to do. And then from there, it becomes a lot easier to just keep moving.
People who are not coders have no idea how hard it is to start coding. It's one of the hardest things to take that first step, and let you understand in other projects it's hard to take that first step. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Edward, go ahead.
Thanks, everybody. It was a lot of good information there. I just, I guess. I work, sorry, I don't know who was saying this, but I work from home, and honestly, I have a big problem separating my work from my personal life. So if you've got that kind of thing, I feel like that's something I think is great and I don't do. So maybe I'm jealous, maybe I'm just not driven to make that distinction. But I just want to ask a general question. So I've just maybe got a few things to respond to a few people that have talked, so maybe this will jog some things while you're hearing this, but does it feel to you like you're sitting around a table right now? I mean, it kind of feels like that to me. I mean, I know, Owen, you're kind of like pointing a finger and, hey, you can talk, more being real nice about it. But it feels personal, like I could see us sitting around a table and having this conversation. So I guess the first thing for Owen, and so I'm going to make a few things here, is that, was this what you were hoping for? Is this what your most successful spaces are like? It's just a general thought.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's really my intention with these, is to have it be a back and forth conversation. And I would say your picture of it being more like people sitting around a table talking is a perfect one.
Oh, great. I mean, well, thank you for setting this up and making this happen. And I know sometimes, you got to cajole people into having a conversation where they're just not talking, but at each other, but to each other. I just want to say, James, I love your frames. I'm not sure I can make use of them at the moment. In general, like, I was kind of wondering if you turn your brain off because it's too active. I feel like I've been there sometimes, like I feel like sometimes you're too effective and you need to dial it back just to enjoy life. And that stress can be both a useful frame, managing and avoiding it, because I feel like I've been there too. So that's sort of just a general thought there. I feel like that's some of the reason, like, when I was in my young 20s, I took up smoking because I felt like I was like, well, my life is too good. Let me do something stupid and hurt myself. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to compare what you're saying is good to smoking. I just feel like, sometimes that drastic change, you're like, anyways, it occurred to me I was hearing some of that in myself when I heard that.
You want to answer that? I can drop you a fast answer if you want it.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, so turning the brain off is the funnest thing to ever do. People know me as I'm pretty smart, right? But say we write a book, I'm like, well, I already did. It's called A Tale of Two Brain Cells. You can turn one off, turn it off, right? But the idea is, if you're having fun, this is for everybody. I mean, like I'm a Christian, I'm gonna live forever. So if I'm having fun, I'm not gonna worry if I'm gonna have more fun somewhere else. I'm having fun now, and the brain goes, "You could be having more fun." I go, "Brain, shut off," and my brain's good at shutting off. So you have to know when to turn your brain on and turn off. Obviously, if you're gonna go into a situation like industrial or something that you could die, you have to have that brain on. But if you're just doing your day-to-day tasks, the guy talked about protocol, put your seatbelt on and everything, you can almost go through life kind of brain dead. And it's like a form of meditation, as SJV said. You can make your bed while you're meditating. So turning your brain off is the coolest thing ever, especially if you're having fun.
I totally hear you on that. I feel like that's why some people resort to external, influences like alcohol or drugs or other things, because it's a switch that not everybody has, and I'm not sure I fully have it myself, but I love the idea of it, and I hope more people can figure that out. That just is a general thought. What I'm hearing and why I think people are in this space and generally around Scott Adams and Owen and everybody else here who's I've seen off and on is that you're better able to understand, like describe, predict, and influence the world around you, and it just makes you a better consumer of everything and a better person who can participate. But Billy, when we were talking about, you mentioned Scott Adams stopping and questioning sort of being the difference, and I both agree with that, and I don't want to say I disagree, because there's something there. I guess I haven't taken the time to figure it out, so like I don't have a hard and fast on this. But stopping and questioning, I wonder if it's feedback, because it says he looks at the thing, or is it like a tag question, as Dr. Hypnosis might say. So I just love trying to figure out what he's doing when he's doing it, because I feel like it's useful. So that's actually part of why I watch the podcast and listen to some of you guys, because I feel like some of you guys are practicing, and I kind of want to see what works, and and practice back. That's it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing I would add to that is just I think Scott is kind of a master at what he does, and I think when you are a master at what you do, you're not even necessarily aware of what you're doing when you're doing it. It just is all instinctual. It's all just built into you as, you just react and respond naturally, and you're not even really thinking about, okay, what technique should I use here? You just automatically use the most effective technique or whatever it is that you would do in that situation. And so I think it's interesting to me sometimes when someone really is an expert and really good at what they do, that they're not usually very aware of what they're doing when they're doing it. And I think that is something that is developed with practice, where when you practice a lot of things over and over again, you get good at it, and it becomes second nature to you, and then you don't even really think about it, just like riding a bike. When you first learn to ride a bike, you're thinking about every pedal and where you're putting your foot and what you're pushing and what you're pulling and all the different things you're doing, and it's really hard. But then once you get the hang of it, you don't even really think about it anymore. You just get on the bike and go, and you're not really thinking about what you're doing when you're doing it. You're not thinking about, which way should I steer or any of that. It's just you're totally going, and you're not really thinking about the individual actions. I think, if you've ever learned to drive a manual car with the clutch and all that, it's a very similar thing. It's really hard when you first start, because you have to figure out the exact right amount of pressure and speed and how you want to do all the different pedals in coordination with each other. But once you get the hang of it, it just kind of comes naturally to you, and you don't even really think about what you're doing, and you're not really, actively thinking about it. And I think that's true for many different things, where when you really master something, it just kind of flows. You don't really have any active thought about every step you're taking, just like you're not really thinking about breathing, So that's my experience with it. Sergio, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Owen. I think it was Edward or Billy that was asking, why is it that Scott Adams is different than everybody else? And I was thinking, during this time, and I took some notes of why I think that he's, why did I pick him to be my influencer, right? Among all the other influencers that are out there. And the one thing that I think that makes a difference with him is that, you're right, he's a high-level wizard, and he knows it. And he understands that very few people have that much knowledge and practice of persuasive powers. If you read his books, Win Bigly especially, it's amazing how he is so transparent about that. So that's one thing. And the credibility that he has is what draws me the most to him, because he has admitted in many occasions, the Covington kids, Hawks and others, when he has been fooled by, when he has been hoaxed by himself, right? He's not going around saying like, oh, you know what, I can never be persuaded, nobody can persuade me. When you hear anybody saying that, or anybody that says that they're 100% sure about anything, the credibility now is gone. And I don't know, maybe Scott persuaded me to, or also to think of him as the highly credible person too, right? So he's done that. But I think that objectively, that's a big difference between Scott and 99.9%. I don't hear often, and whenever you hear a host or an influencer admit a fault, yes, they do. Sometimes they make a big deal out of it, right? They make a big manifesto instead of just being a part of the system to know that, yes, we're going to be wrong sometimes, we're going to make mistakes, and nobody's 100% correct on everything. So that is what makes him different, that he's not saying, oh, you know what, let me tell you how it is. And then he doesn't have that ego that it stops him from admitting mistakes. So that's what I think makes him different. So I don't know what you think about that, but that's it. And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. And one more thing, just when it comes to advice, personal advice, I call it the Joe Rogan trap, right? If you ask Joe Rogan for advice in your life, it doesn't matter what problem you have, you already know what he's gonna tell you, right? He's gonna tell you do jujitsu, take a cold plunge, right? and that's it, right? And also be your best. So all of us, when we ask advice from somebody, they're always gonna tell us what is worth for them, the best, and that's why we have to keep that into account. So that's it. Thank you, Owen.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I definitely think that's part of a difference, what you said about Scott, in terms of being, the way I would put it is he's very authentic, he's vulnerable, he's, really being genuine in all of his interactions, and just being a real person, and exposing some of those vulnerabilities that you talked about in terms of not having a huge ego, or at least not always having a huge ego. He would, tell you that he can dial it up and down, and I think that's something a lot of people can do, and probably do on a regular basis, but I think it's probably more often a weakness of somebody if they can't dial it down and they can't be humble or they can't admit a mistake, that kind of shows that they're weak in that sense, that they can't handle the vulnerability. They can't handle being wrong. They can't handle being exposed and embarrassed and things like that. And I think that's why Scott talks about being able to handle embarrassment as a superpower, because it just makes you kind of fearless. And that's a very powerful thing, but I think it's hard for a lot of people to do.
And he admits that he's on an information bubble, right? He says like we're all in information bubbles, and we're not aware of what are the blind spots. If we're aware, it wouldn't be a blind spot. So that's what makes him different. That he's aware that there are things that he cannot see. And all other podcasts, they don't ever say that. They always think, oh, I'm seeing everything. Trust me, 100%. So yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Kyle.
Well, I just wanted to share some highlights of Scott's impact on me. They're not too connected to each other. I'll try to go quick here.
Okay.
Time-wise, I'd say I'm by far more invested in Scott than any other podcaster. I think I joined somewhere early in Trump's first term. And my wife just told me yesterday, she says she's seen that I'm very anxious. And it's like an earlier commenter said, is she doesn't really understand my connection to him and what he's meant to me. Mm-hmm. I just saw Mike Benz call Scott a modern day Socrates, and then he changed it to Aristotle, but I'd go with Socrates because he was willing to get canceled for confronting narratives and hallucinations of the times, and that cancellation wasn't a surprise to him. He actively knew what he was doing there. My mental health and physical health have improved greatly with his systems over goals, and just he's always like working out and eating right and things like that are going to do much more than antidepressants or anything.
Yeah.
one episode I'd like to re-find is when, I think it was during a holiday, he explained his cartooning career, and like, I think it was Schultz or some other people gave him advice that he thought was strange at the time. I thought that was a very interesting episode. One observation he made at some point was how his then wife would only talk when he had the faucet on or was in the bathroom, etc. And so that's just been sort of an inside joke with myself since that point, because I've enjoyed the Ask Scott segments that he starts the episodes with in the last few years, and that he basically says no studies are reliable or proof, and I think he's come a lot around on climate change into a much better perspective on that over the years. I enjoyed his printer problem stories, and when he threw it out the window, his Kamala Harris drunk stories, he'd get giggling on those, and that was always get me giddy. I never quite understood his simulation theory or no free will theories, except that he would make up his mind to change an issue personally for himself or nationally on the national stage, and that would generally play out over years and prove true for his intentions. He is basically my only source of news. I don't go to Fox News or CNN or anything. I'm in law enforcement, and I checked out on mainstream media during the Michael Brown, George Floyd era, and only read local news. Anything else, I just get filtered through him. Overall, I believe he's helped swing the pendulum back to a much more common sense approach of thought in this nation, and helped Trump win this election for that reason. And his big thing on Trump, as far as common sense, has been take the free money that's on the table, and that Trump is so good at that and winning the 90-10s. And that's all the thoughts that I have. I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. I think you're spot on with a lot of that. And I often ask the question myself of like, how much is he just observing what Trump is doing, and how much is he influencing what Trump is doing?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. He definitely can get a bug into the ear of the administration in some way or shape or form.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there are people in the administration that are listening to him on a regular basis, so I think his points of view definitely get floated in front of the president on a regular basis, I think.
All right, I'll check out. Thank you for the time.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Depleted, go ahead.
Good morning. I think I'm supposed to start with saying I'm a first-time caller and rather new listener.
All right, well, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for doing what you do.
Sure.
I of course, have known about Scott Adams for years. I used to watch, read the Dilbert cartoons regularly. He may have even come out and spoken to our group at a computer software firm I worked at in the past. Anyways, I was happy to find him, and now I found you guys. Do you do this after party type thing all the time, or just when Scott's riding in an ambulance?
Usually it's every Saturday after Scott's show.
Oh, awesome! I will put it on my schedule. I've followed you here on X, so I can get to this chat later on.
Yeah, sounds great. I do some additional spaces on Sundays sometimes for subscribers, but Saturday is for everybody, and it's the after party, so it's just right after Scott's show. And also, most Saturdays, I mean, if I have some personal conflict, I might not be able to do it on Sundays, but it's pretty rare. So most Saturdays we're doing this.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate y'all being here. I did have a few notes that I was taking down, so I had to jot them down because I have ADHD tendencies, and I come up with really good ideas, but then 3 minutes later I forgot completely what they are. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about organizing your thoughts and making a list and all that. And in order to get something done, to act, to spur yourself to action. And I remembered as you were talking, one particular incident back in my programming career. We had just finished up this huge project. I automated the entire pre-press graphics workflow for this printing plant. So all the stuff that the film strippers and layout artists and all that stuff did, I was doing electronically and run off of a computer. Database was kind of pushing everything along. And they came to me after that, great, it's wonderful, and they still haven't found a bug in it, but that's probably more by chance than any kind of talent. But he said, we need to be able to put this out in our publisher's hands. So can you make a version that works on a Mac? And I'm thinking, holy crap, I got an Oracle database and a huge server in the other room and thousands of lines of data, and I don't know if all that could be done. And so, for half an hour, 45 minutes, I argued with him about how impossible his request was. And just saying that was basically making a list of all the things that I had to overcome in order to do that. And he wanted to have an estimate as to how long it would take me to do that. And I said, well, it would take weeks, probably months. He goes, all right, 3 months. And so he left my office, and I sat there and I went, well, how am I going to do this? What do I need to overcome? And the very first thing I thought of was, well, I'm not going to put an Oracle installation, several $1,000s worth of software investment in all these associate publishers' hands, because they're not going to be able to get it and keep it running and all that. So I thought, well, our data files are just flat text files. I could use that as the database and see how I run from there. Well, short answer is I had the entire program written an hour later.
Nice.
1 hour. I was like, holy crap. Anyway, so I just thought that was kind of interesting. It tied in personally with me with what you were saying about itemizing, making a list. Sometimes just the act of writing it down or saying it out loud to yourself is all you need. I mean, the information's already there in your head, but if you don't let it come out one way or the other, then you never get started on it.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, I'm going through some of that right now with a personal project of trying to automate a lot of my news posting. And it's interesting to me just because I'm trying to probably go farther than I need to with it. Or maybe it is that I'm trying to do some things that are just really hard to do with a computer. Because it was interesting to me when I started down the path of this project, which was maybe a week or two ago. And I kind of started with the idea is, okay, I'm going to do it all with AI. I'm going to do it with agentic AI. I'm going to have this, an AI architecture that'll just do it all for me. And, so I mapped out the whole process and I broke it down into a bunch of tasks, and I even had AI help me with that part of it to break it down into the tasks and stuff. And I started at the beginning and just started automating all the different parts of the process. But then, what I realized after playing with it for a long time is really there's only one step that matters that the computer is really good at doing quickly. And then the other parts, AI is terrible at a lot of this stuff. Maybe the secret sauce of my process is picking out which stories to post. And that's what I was kind of hoping AI could do for me, is to sift through the thousands of headlines that I look at every day and pick out the 30 or so stories that I post. But what I noticed was when I do it myself, it's actually pretty quick to pick out the stories. I probably spend maybe half an hour with that. And I just intuitively know, okay, this one's a good one to post and these ones are not. And I just go through it really quickly, and I pretty quickly can pick out which ones are there. And I do have a whole bunch of heuristics running in my head in terms of which ones would flag my attention and say, okay, that's a good one. But that's actually really hard to get an AI to do, because they have to go through every single story and look at every single heuristic and evaluate every single thing. And it's it would take probably days for it to go through all that.
Your AI needs to be trained as to how you think, so it knows what you're going to find of interest.
Right, but that was part of what I went through, was kind of trying to get that down on paper, right? And I did. I think I did. I came up with 60 questions. And I said, okay, if any of these questions, the answer is yes, then that's kind of a point in favor of posting that article. And some of them are specific topics that I'm interested in. Other ones are just general questions, is this going to be interesting? Or is this something people might want to repost? Or is this something Scott would want to talk about in his show? And so there's some general ones like that, and then there's some specific ones like, you know, is there a good story that talks about the positive benefits of coffee? Like if there is, then I want to post it, right? So like there's a mix of things, but I think the problem I've had is that just efficiency wise, like AI, at least running local models like I'm trying to do, because I don't want to pay a whole bunch of money for this. You know, it's just too slow. I'm still wrestling with it, but it's like no matter what prompt I give it, it's like it might take at least a couple minutes to respond. And when you think about that, it's like, well, that's okay, a couple minutes, but it's not just a couple minutes. It's a couple minutes times 1,000 stories, right? So when you do the math, it's like, okay, that's not going to work. I've played with other ideas, like maybe I can give it a whole bunch of headlines at once and just say, pick out the best ones. And that reduces the time, but it also probably reduces the quality, because when you do it that way, it's doing whatever black box thinking it's doing, and you don't really know what it's doing or whether it's actually evaluating the same way I would. And it's interesting to me just that, like, you know, I'm kind of just doing this intuitively. Like, I don't really even have a lot of active thought going on. Like, I'm not thinking about each one of those 60 questions. It's just when I see a headline, it's like, yes, that's one. And I just slot that in, and then I move on and I look at another 100 headlines, and I'm like, okay, there's a good one. And so, you know, I've kind of reached the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't even think I need to automate that. Like, I'm pretty good at that, and I'm pretty fast at that, and maybe all I need to automate is the stupid stuff that doesn't require any thought, where I just need to take the text of that article and put it in an X post. And that's probably more than half the time I spend on it. And I've already created a program that'll do that in a matter of seconds.
I was going to say, create a little bot that will go through there and encapsulate the article and generate a post.
Yeah, so that's you know, that's where I'm at right now. Is it's like, you know, I've probably already done everything I need to do to automate most of this and cut down the time I spend on it in half. And that's probably a good place to just stop, as opposed to saying, okay, I got to automate the selection of the stories, because it just seems like that's not something that computers are very well suited for, at least given the current technology. And I may still keep playing with it and seeing if it can somehow efficiently do what I'm trying to ask it to do. But you know, it's just interesting to me that, like, I've kind of wrestled with this project for a while now, and you know, I'm running into all the limitations of what AI can do, and you know, it does seem to me like I've kind of identified these are the ones that a human is much better at. And so maybe I should just be that human, as opposed to trying to get a computer to replace me. And then, you know, let myself do the things I'm good at, and then let it do the things that I don't need to do, because it really doesn't even require any thought. But that also means probably doesn't even require AI. It's just a Python program that just takes an input and processes it and gives me an output. And so it's almost like I don't even need AI at this point. So it's like I've kind of gone full circle to saying, okay, I thought I was using AI or wanting to use AI, and I kind of did just want to, because I wanted to play with it, and I have played with it, but I've kind of realized that it's mostly irrelevant to what I'm trying to do.
I hear you. Well, I don't want to take up all of your time. I'm sure there's other people here that have their hands up and want to speak as well. I did have another thing, like a reframe, if I might be so bold, about you were saying earlier about people afraid of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to learn. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
What you're afraid of is being publicly, you know, outed as being wrong. Well, I'm sorry, that's the process of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're afraid of being wrong and you're shy to talk because you're afraid to learn, maybe learn that you were wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to the embarrassment angle. Like, you know, I think most people would probably say they want to learn, and maybe that is a good reframe from that perspective to say, let's cast this as a positive thing. But I do think a lot of people are just worried about being embarrassed about something or being wrong about something, and they just worry that people will think they're stupid, or that they, you know,
Well, that's the basis of the isn't it? That state's right encapsulated right there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a problem getting up on stage if you're going to give command performance and do excellently. You probably look forward to that, but you sure are afraid of being, you know, crashing, throwing a bomb on stage, you know.
Yeah.
or being embarrassed or ashamed. Anyways, thanks for doing this and inviting us all along. I appreciate it all.
All right. Thank you.
I'll come back and chat with you some other time.
Sounds good.
Have a great day.
Thanks. All right. SJV, go ahead.
Oh, well, I done took my hand down because I thought I'd spoken enough, but I wanted to mention the guy that said working from home. Working from home poses its own challenges. For over the last decade, I worked from home, and you have to learn to deal with things differently, because when you work remotely, all that really matters is how much you accomplish. And I actually put something in the comments about this. My strategy was do whatever it took to accomplish stuff. And I mean, y'all people might think I'm crazy, because the people in my group that I was working for were over 2,000 miles away. And they got the impression that I worked like 18, 19-hour days. Well, the truth was far from that. Whenever I got tired, I went and took a nap. I even had my boss call me up at times and wake me up, and I'd say, "Oh, sorry, I was taking a nap." But when you're working remotely, just worry about what you produce. I mean, if I was working for Owen and he said, he was like, "Well, he's getting stuff done. Owen's going to be happy." If he notices, well, he's not getting anything done, but he's on a line, he's working 18, 19 hours, he's going to be like, I need to find somebody else. If he's working that long and not accomplishing diddly squat, I need to find somebody else. But I'd also encourage people to have a separate place where you work versus working where you live. I actually had an office built next to my house to give me that logical separation, because working can actually be addictive. So
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think the first part of what you said, I would liken that to more the Dilbert idea of, it's kind of the whole system of work is a little bit broken, in the sense of you're usually measuring people by how many hours they work or when they're working, because you're paying them by the hour. So you figure, okay, I need to have a bunch of hours from that person. And so you're not necessarily even thinking about it in terms of work output. You're thinking of it in terms of just, were they online, or were they working, or did they do a bunch of effort? Because that's what I'm paying them for. And you're really not paying them for that. You're paying them for their work output. You're paying them for the results they achieve. But most people don't think about it that way, or if they even try and think about it that way, they find it hard, because it's hard to measure sometimes, depending on what type of work you're talking about, at least. Because, let's say you're a project manager. Like, how do you measure the output of a project manager? Well, I would say maybe it's by the success of the project, but that's a little bit too coarse, because you're not even necessarily going to know until the end of the project how it turned out. But I think, you probably can experience what it's like to work with that person, and, how they're leading meetings and what happens as a result of each meeting they have, and whether or not everybody feels like they're getting all the direction they need, and that they're able to be productive in creating their own work output based on all the things the project manager is doing. But those things can be a lot harder to measure. And so it's a lot easier, and people often just fall back to saying, well, was he online at 7 a.m? And was he online at 11 at night? And if he was, then you just think, oh, that person works really hard. That must be great. He's doing a really great job. But in reality, you might not be doing much, or to your point, it might even be a sign that you're not very good at what you're doing, because it takes so long to get it done. And so often it's probably even better if you can say, well, if someone could get that whole thing done in 4 hours and take a nap, they might be a better person to work with than someone who takes 18 hours and still doesn't get it done. But, it comes back to being able to measure the results. And, some types of jobs, it might be easy, like programming. You can say how many lines of code they produce. or did their program work the first time you tried it, or how high quality was the output. But in many jobs, it might be a lot harder to say, okay, what exactly did I get? And was it what I needed? And did it achieve the result I was looking for? And I think it probably is realistic to be able to do that in many situations, if not most situations. But I think it is often harder because you really have to think about what is the result I'm looking for here, and think about it in terms of the outcome as opposed to the inputs that go into the outcome. And, I think some people play tricks, which is maybe another thing that's probably been featured in Dilbert before, but I've certainly seen it where some people will say, well, you gotta, be the last one to stop working every day. So, you need to send an email at 11 o'clock at night just to show people that you're still working. or the opposite might be true, where you get online early in the day, even if you're not really doing anything, just to show that you're online, and to show you sent an email at 5 a.m, so therefore you were up and working when everybody else was sleeping, and that's a sign that you're working really hard. And some people just do those things even apart from the actual work that they're doing, just to make a show of it. And unfortunately, I think it often works, where people will be impressed by that, rather than being concerned, like you're kind of pointing out that maybe they should be, about somebody working odd hours, because when you're remote, you don't know how much someone's working or when they're working, and so getting those emails at odd hours, or getting a Teams message or whatever else at a weird time, might be something that communicates something that is not necessarily an accurate reflection of what kind of results are you achieving.
Even when I worked in the office, I had a way of judging people. I looked for the people that left at exactly 5 o'clock. Like, ooh, there's a horn that went off or something.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, those aren't the most productive people. Those aren't the ones that are really there to get something done. Because, when I work, if it got to be 5 o'clock and I'm still right in the middle of something, I'm not going anywhere. So there's indicators you can look at to who's performing and who's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely there. I just think it's uncommon that people are measuring people that way, even though it probably is a much more effective way of doing it. All right, thanks. James, go ahead.
You guys are talking about embarrassment, and that's what I'm really good at, is embarrassing myself. And actually, it sounds like it's funny, but it's the core of punk, man. It's the core of punk to be able to jump up on stage and be an idiot, okay? Cheech and Chong and Up in Smoke had a quote, "Besides, it's just punk rock, man. You don't have to know how to play," right? If you have that attitude about life, that like when you fall down and people laugh at you, you don't look defensive. You're like, I fell down, Pee Wee Herman did it best. He's trying to show off to some kids, like with his bike. He's riding the bike with no hands, put his legs up, and he falls over, does a couple flips, and jumps up. He's like, I meant to do that, And the kids are like, yeah, but it's funny, right? You let them laugh at you, laugh with you, right? Because if you're sitting down on the ground, and you fell, like, I fell, and you're like, you're not hurt. You're like, people laughing. You're like, don't do that. Then they feel defensive and they stop laughing. But if you're like, I fell, and I'll do it again, and they'll laugh even more, and they'll think you're awesome, right? And that's the core of life. You want people to feel comfortable around you. So embarrassment is a power skill. Be ready to be embarrassed. Don't seek it out, right? And this is corporate, okay? Most corporations got on the line of like, oh no, that guy did something wrong, write him up and get him out of here, right? Whereas most corporations would be like, you did something wrong. You blew up a freaking circuit board, and the whole freaking thing smells like silicon, burnt smoke. Let's have a party. Here's a $50 gift certificate. We'll put the circuit board on the wall and write how you messed up. We have a my bad culture here. And I'm going to go bring it back to soccer. I didn't play soccer my whole life. And when I did play soccer, I didn't know how to play, but I was like a ninja, right? But the long story short is, I'd make mistakes relentlessly, and I'd be like, my bad, my bad, my bad, my bad. I said my bad so many times, the whole team would laugh, and they'd love me. It's camaraderie, right? So when you bring the my bad culture to a corporate situation, you take away the blame game. And if anybody's ever read the Bible, sin loves the blame game, right? You end up with evil when you're evil corporation. Who's ever heard of an evil corporation? I'm sure no one's ever heard of an evil corporation. Not this punk, right? Yeah, corporations end up getting evil partly because of the blame game and ambition chasing and all that stuff. If everybody's got each other's back and they say, oh, I screwed up, and then it's actually a positive. You get that check written to you. You messed up, And so I'll explain why it's good to be my bad, why it's good to be embarrassed. Because let's say you're doing inspection of critical parts, right? And your friend over there messed up, but your friend wouldn't like it if you told him you messed up. So you're like, well, this part might fail 1 in 1,000 times, and it might just be a little wreck. It's probably not that big a deal. It's just a brake caliper or something. Probably other things. And you let stuff slide because you don't want to do the blame game. But if you're like, my bad, hey, dude, this brake's going to have someone go into a ravine. But it's like, wow, dude, you're going to put the guy in a ravine. And then let's have the birthday cake out. And everybody's happy, They put the brake caliber. This would have killed someone in the wall. But we have a my bad culture here, right? So it's more fun to be you, right? People who are conformists, think about it. People who are conformists that don't want to be seen as different, they're not themselves. They're trying to be someone else, right? A lot of these conformists, these Democrats, these leftists, they don't like themselves. You can see it on their face. They red hair and they're hating and they try and dress up as different stuff, right? They don't like themselves. And all of a sudden they're conformists with everybody else, right? So the key of every conformist is someone that doesn't like themselves. You got to be able to be out there and embarrassed, show your real self. These guys saying that they're going to show their true selves. They're liberals and that, but and they want to be just like everybody else, right? Anyway, so I dance like a freak. Sometimes the cops get called, but Sir Mix-a-Lot's dance crew called me out one time. You got to be embarrassing yourself or you're conforming, okay? And then I'll just end up, what is cool, right? In the 70s, you had Fonzie. Yay! In the 80s, we had weird stuff like Revenge of the Nerds, Police Academy, Pee Wee Herman, the Ragtag Crew. But towards the early 80s, we had Van Damme, I am too cool for you. And Steven Seagal, I am also too cool for you, right? But if you're too cool for someone, you're not cool at all because you have to be nice to everybody. Anyway, I just want to let you guys go out there and embarrass yourselves and enjoy it, man. It's kind of fun, I'm done.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. Chris, go ahead.
Hey, Owen. Hey, everybody. I wanted to mention that your illustration or your attempt to automate demonstrates the difference between actual intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I think it comes down to what, that selection of what is a good article. The knowledge base to decide what is good is, it's a pretty big knowledge base. It's not just like a list of 50 things. You've got a lifetime of, looking at news and understanding news, and that nuance is sort of woven into that selection process. And like you said, another thing is that, driving a standard, at some point you don't even think about shifting the gears and all that's going on in that. As you're consulting that data set in your mind, coming up, and this one comes out and pops up as, yeah, this is a good one. I'll post this article because of this various reason or how I feel about it, whatever the case might be. So, and I think that's going to be a big problem with artificial intelligence going forward. And I really like that example, and I think I might use that, at work when we start talking about how we can leverage AI for different tasks and projects, and really trying to find where it's well suited and where it's not well suited to use. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I may still leverage AI for some of my process, but I think it's going to be a lot more focused. It might be more like helping me format the article or helping me make sure that I didn't repeat a paragraph or little things like that where it can just do that pretty quickly, and it's only doing it for the articles that I've already decided I'm posting. So it only has to do it 30 times as opposed to 1,000. But I think I think it is probably the difference between real intelligence and artificial intelligence, because I think when you're using artificial intelligence, it's kind of like you have to give it all the context. And when you talk about all the things I've learned for however many years I've been on this earth, and it's all kind of just up in my brain and it's all just operating autonomously, That's a ton of context. Like, you can't encapsulate that in a small prompt. And it's really hard to say, okay, how would I tell a computer everything they need to consider to decide, is a particular story worth putting at the top of the list when you have 1,000 things to look at? Whereas I can intuitively do it just by scanning through a bunch of articles and, have it done in half an hour. So it's an interesting dynamic.
One of the things I've done
the other
is,
topic I wanted to bring up, and
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, the other topic I wanted to bring up had to do with Sydney and the mass shooting Islamic terrorist attack in Sydney. And there was a proposed hero in the story that turned out to be, a Muslim that disarmed one of the terrorists and ended up actually being shot a couple times in the arm. And when you talk about, making mistakes or taking risks or being willing to be embarrassed, I threw out a post that questioned, I'm like, I think this alleged hero kind of maybe needs to be looked at, because it could be a way to create a narrative to make it seem like, at the same time as a Muslim terrorist attack, that, look, we can also get along and Muslims are also helping us and are our friends. So, and I just raised the question, and I got a lot of people just didn't even want the possibility of the question to be asked, and how could you even think that, and just basically kind of questioning my motive to wonder that. But I think it's important to be willing to ask risky questions that might face ridicule. I mean, I've done that in the past, and on occasion I've been correct, but I think people have to be somewhat bold to, if you're in the prediction business, you know what I mean, and to stand out there and ask questions and put your reason why for the question out, and then kind of ignore those people who just want to ridicule you for asking a tough question.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Mark, go ahead.
Hey, great to be on here with you guys. You were talking earlier about effectiveness work, and it reminded me of, another layer of that. The first part is, you said, hey, it's just putting in the hours, right? And we get measured on that because we work by the hour. And, most of my life, I've worked basically in a salary position. And when you're working in a salary position, you really are working to be effective and to get the job done. And it hopefully doesn't take you too many hours. If you're really effective at the work, you're getting the task done. And so that's the first layer of just working and getting paid by the hour. And are you effective? Are you gainfully employed? I had a manager once, and I say manager and not a leader, who just said, well, just make sure that you're gainfully employed. If you're going to go over to that aircraft hangar and you're going to watch those people work and take some notes and observe, take some work with you while you're doing it. And if you let that sink in a little bit, is, that was the mindset of that manager. He didn't see the value in engaging with the employees, with the aircraft mechanics who are doing the work. He didn't see the value in the observation and the camaraderie and the team you were building and all that. He didn't consider that work. He considered that just basically hanging out and goofing off. And so take some work with you was what he told somebody to do. This individual who told that story years later, when he was the SES director of the Department of Aviation, somebody that I worked with in my office through the Mike Monroney Center here in Oklahoma City, that's responsible for training all the air traffic controllers. So that's the level of a real leader. So to get to my point, and I digress to this a little bit, it's the finishing the project is the second layer of that. Did I get the project completed? Did I get it on time, under budget? Was it effective? Did it achieve the customer's goal? But then, and especially in the work that I do, which is in process improvement, the third layer of that really is the strategic part of that. Are we changing the culture? And the two, sometimes getting the project done tactically and changing the culture run counter to each other. So what I bring to the team is the ability to see way downstream and to understand that you can do a lot of harm in trying to get the project done to the effect of changing the culture to one that embraces continuous improvement in any process or product. And so I would say that, and that kind of leads me to my last point here, and that is working smarter and not necessarily harder. And I learned that a long time ago. I remember I was about 6 years old, and my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, worked in a fix-it shop. He, a long time ago, now this would have been like 1965, 64, 65, they used to fix things. He had a mixer or a blender or a clock or a toaster or something like that, and it didn't work. You didn't throw it away. You went to a fix-it shop, took it in, and the guy fixed it for you, and then you came and picked it up. You paid him a few dollars, and you did that. One time I was watching him work, and he opened something up, and he took a wire, and he put it back on a post, and he screwed the screw down to put the wire back and make it connect in continuity. He plugged the thing in and checked to make sure it worked, and it did. And then he wrote a ticket, and he put $2 on it. Now, this was 1964, and it took him about less than 10 minutes to save that, to make that improvement, or make that
Repair?
Yeah, repair, thank you. So he did that, and I said, Grandpa, you only worked on that for 5 minutes. Why did you charge $2? And he said, you don't get paid for what you do, you get paid for what you know. And based on what you know, it's how good you get the result at the end. And that has resonated with me my entire career. And that is what I would like to teach any leader is, assess people by what they achieve and what their outcome is. And especially that strategic outcome, that long-term downstream aspect of how they get things done. And that you'll probably be a lot better leader, and you'll probably, if you can encourage that kind of thing, your company will be a lot better for it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think that's how I try to approach work myself, and hopefully it's how I'm being perceived in terms of the value I'm bringing is more based on what I know and what I can do in any given moment, as opposed to, how many hours did I put in or how hard did I work on something. Certainly I do work hard and I put in a lot of hours, but I think, it's all geared towards what is required. Like what do I need to do to get the outcome that we need? And I don't want to put in any more time than I need to. And so I'm not going to just work hours arbitrarily just to work those hours. I'm going to just put in the time that it takes to get the outcome. And that's how I approach managing projects is like, I'm here to make sure this project succeeds. I'm here to make sure we get the outcome that you're looking for. And, that might mean I work extra hours, or it might mean I don't need to work nearly as many hours as I thought. And it doesn't really matter. It just means I got to look out across the whole project and make sure that I know everything that has to happen. And I got to look out for what could go wrong and make sure that I prevent those things from going wrong, or if they do go wrong, I get them back on track. And, things always come up that might go differently than I thought it would at the outset, and that's typical, but that's also something you can kind of plan for. That's what I do, is I figure, okay, at some point, things are going to go off the rails, and I got to get them back on the rails, or things are going to take a turn that I wasn't expecting, and I got to ride it out and see where it goes, and make sure that we can still get back to where we need to be. And, it's somewhat unpredictable, but I also find that kind of more interesting. That I don't know exactly how it's going to go.
I've got 2 projects I'm working on right now at the hospital system, and I'll be quiet for just a second. I know probably SJV wanted to say something. But the one that I'm doing 2, one is called Culture of Mobility, and basically we need to get patients up out of bed. I work in healthcare, I work for a hospital system, and I only get to work 20 hours a week because I'm a PRN, and that's how much money they want to spend on me. But that's how do nurses get patients up out of bed, get them mobile, because we found out that they're a lot better, they discharge sooner, they discharge in a better state, they discharge home instead of the skilled nursing and all that. So we're trying to get that, and part of it is we just don't have a means to measure that right now. So that's our first order of business, is to get that done. Well, and to achieve that, I'm actually going to the floor with the nurse leader, a director over a nursing department and units, multiple managers under them. And we're going in, we're talking to nurses face to face. We're asking them questions. The lean tool is called Gemba. We refer to it as Go-See because we don't want to do Japanese terms where we don't want to, put that up as a barrier. Some people call it rounding, but basically you're going to see, you're asking why, and you're showing respect to the people who are doing the work. You're connecting with them, and you're getting their ideas, and you're showing them respect by asking them, and that changes the culture in a positive way. The other project I'm working is on suspected transfusion reactions. So when you give a blood transfusion and you think they might have had a reaction because they're the wrong type, it's the wrong cross and match, they didn't have antigens properly identified for that patient, well, you've got to do some certain things. And we only have right now 14% of the time that we do transfusions where we have a reaction that we actually do the process right. Huge opportunity for improvement there, believe me. Now, not every one of those is a patient safety issue. Some of it is just an administrative error. But the point is, our goal is 90%, and we are way far off from that. Now, what I want is to solve that problem tactically. But really what I would like to have is for everybody to see how good the process improvement methodology works, to have confidence that they can take that on themselves, and that they're not victims of their bad processes that they work on. And it really is about systems over goals. In that case, we want a system in place that people embrace process improvement instead of a goal to actually solve a problem. And I'll leave you guys with that. It is my dream job, and I get to do this in healthcare and other industries too. So, follow me for more on that.
I just wanted to point out that measurables can be misleading. For instance, if you give me 1,000 lines of code task, I can write it in 10,000 lines of code if you like. If you like lines of code, it can be very misleading.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of productivity measures like that are kind of flawed because they can be gamed, and they are gamed if you let them. If you give people the wrong incentives and you say you're going to get paid by the line of code, you're going to get a whole lot of lines of code. If you say you're going to pay people for every bug they find, they're going to find more bugs, and they might even create more bugs so they can find them. And so you need to be really careful about what incentives you give people, because are essentially setting the rules of the game, and everyone's going to play the game to get the highest score. So, be careful about what goals you set, people. All right, Edward, go ahead.
Thanks, Owen. So thanks for describing. Actually, you answered one of my questions before I even asked it, which was how you pick your articles. I'm guessing, I don't really know, but just sort of a newer, just because I feel like, Scott sources a lot of your stuff that you basically were like, I like this community, how can I be useful? And then you started just like trying to pre-sweep the articles and, make them available for discussion and stuff. So I feel like that's pretty cool. It looks like, if that's right, I feel like that's probably how it worked.
Yeah, and I mean that's how it started to some extent. There's a little more to it. I also had sort of an experiment I did to see if I could influence Scott using the techniques that he had taught me, and it worked better than I ever expected. So
that was pretty awesome. Yeah, I can see it go both ways. Local AI, are you using the Olama for this stuff? Just out of curiosity. That's just a quick question. I have a little bit more, but
yes.
Okay. We got a bunch of nerds here, so I don't want to go too far into that. I just heard that. I was like, okay. I wanted to call out something since we had talked about Bondi Beach earlier, and I think a lot of people have followed that. There's just a lot of horrific footage on it, and But there was one interesting thing that happened, which has nothing to do with the actual Bondi Beach event itself, that I wanted to call out. And you guys may or may not have seen it, because it was an influence operation or something that I can't quite tell. In the fog of war, if I say the name Edward Crabtree, does anybody know what I'm talking about here?
Doesn't ring a bell with me.
Which is probably good. But there was basically the one guy that wrestled the gun away from one of the people that were in there, which is an amazing piece of footage, to be perfectly honest. Somehow, someone set up a site today that is called the dailyos.world, and somehow it got linked a few times. I'm assuming it was made by AI. Community Notes showed it up, like someone finally was like, hey, this isn't real, this was set up today. But interestingly enough, they had a fake news account that just, I assume, just picked a random name for a person and made a different hero. They were like, this hero is this. So people were kind of they were battling back and forth with Community Notes. And if you're on X and you don't have Community Notes set up, highly recommend it. Not because you want the answer, just look at the fighting that goes on behind the scenes. You'll see a lot of like the manipulation that people are pushing back and forth. And this one was actually quite interesting. Like, who set up a fake site to basically make this hero like a 43-year-old IT white person or something? So I just want to call that out as a specific example of a major thing in the fog of war that you can go look at, and it's probably still in some of these posts as people were kind of fighting back and forth about it in Community Notes. So highly recommended Community Notes. Just fog of war, good example. Mm-hmm. Sort of the last thing here is sort of about embarrassment that we were talking about before. I don't know about your true self showing, because I feel like we're all still discovering and adding to ourselves. Scott Adams says basically take a speech class of some sort, and I don't disagree with that. What I wanted to maybe add to that, if someone who is, maybe you don't want to take that much time, or maybe that's a little too much. I said this on a Doc Hypnosis space probably last week or a few weeks ago. To make embarrassment useful, here's a potential alternative that helped me. I don't know if it'll help you, but it helped me. Take a dance class. Learn to be all right with your embarrassment. You'll realize that everyone else, as Scott Adams says, and other people say, is kind of a basket case too. Most people don't know how to dance. Like, you're not dancing a specific dance all the time, right? You're just kind of making up the moves. But it's sort of learning to be comfortable in your embarrassment, learning to be fun with it, and especially if you're an introvert, this is the skill you can learn, part of your skill stack, and it kind of becomes natural. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an alternative for other people that are like, well, this kind of might be fun too. So that's it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Jean, go ahead.
Oh, hey, I just wanted to comment on, I lose track of who was talking about the Bondi Beach guy. I haven't followed that full story, but I think it's kind of a stretch to say that that it might be a complete setup and the hero might be just there to create a positive dynamic. I don't think that's how things work when you're in an emergency and adrenaline takes over. I think it was a legit guy, but and it also wouldn't follow the pattern of any other terrorist attack I've read about, at least Islamic terrorist attack. That'd be a totally new thing, but there's no bigots sometimes. And there are plenty of people who happen to be Muslim who are nice, who aren't fully read into the program. Anyway, that's just what I was wanting to say.
Yeah, it's probably too early to really know all the details, and with many of these types of situations, you never really get all the details. So I don't know that we're ever necessarily going to have a full understanding of any of these school shooting events or anything like that. So I certainly don't think we're ever going to get all the facts on things like the Las Vegas shooting and maybe even the Charlie Kirk shooting and all the other things. But it is the fog of war when you're in the first couple of days after one of these events happens. So I would certainly be careful with any information you see at this point.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say I seriously doubt that, although it's good to ask questions, because so many things we thought were crazy turned out to actually be true.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
James, go ahead.
So Chris down there was talking about ignore the naysayers who say that's a crazy theory. Don't think about that, you know. They say conspiracy theory these days, and I'm like, well, you know what a conspiracy is? It's when two people do a crime you don't know about. It's in the law book. So if you think conspiracy is crazy, well, it's in the law books. That makes you crazy, right? So Scott Adams' biggest win for us all. Scott Adams' biggest win for humanity, for all of us, I believe, is, you know, he's out there guessing what's going to come on. He's thinking for himself. What would have been called conspiracy theory 6 years ago or 2018 to 2024 is now like, hey, Aristotle, don't accept everything as truth. Think for yourself. It's what those people who push lies on TV, radio, and newspaper don't want you to do. It's crazy to think for yourself. Why would you do that? Well, thank you very much, Scott. You taught not just us who knew it, but people who might not know it. And it's when you have that societal collective knowledge that conspiracy theories aren't crazy anymore, well, then people get to think for themselves. Scott Adams, you've done the world a huge service in love, right? And I've seen it myself. In 1999, I said lithium-ion cars are the future. My fellow students at Carnegie Mellon, you know, this is a really smart school, #1 in the world for physics and stuff, they laughed at me. All of them laughed at me. I showed the professors, they said I was wrong. They kind of gave me a chagrin for smiles, you know, which is mockery, right? 2000, I had to argue for 3 days for the virtual keyboard you use on your smartphone. One girl got so mad at me that she said, we should ship it with Post-it notes on the back. Yeah, and then you replace them or whatever, I don't know. And in 2002, when I invented modern and future AI, Carnegie Mellon professors, robotics and CS said, natural language is not going to be first. That's too hard. You know, natural language being English and stuff. They'll say, we'll have navigation first. I'm like, dude, you're not going to know what a Mountain Dew can is, what an elm tree is. There's different things in nature. There's mutations. We don't know what stuff is. We can't navigate the robots around the world first. Like, no, that'll happen before natural language. I'm like, no, it's going to be easy. And I was right. Now they say, I go down there and talk to them like, you're right, Jim. You're right. You're right. You're right. And they just try to ignore me because I'm canceled, you know. So people are conformists in generally. The idea of the norm, even researchers will be naysayers because it's way easier to always side on what everybody already knows because then you're more right often, right? The system doesn't change that often, so they just would rather be part of the system and you get their paycheck. Ronnie James Dio says, live in a circle of corporate. You can either be a gypsy, go out there and party and be a crazy person, or live in a circle. That's the two extremes, obviously, but a lot of people just want to get that paycheck. They always want to seem like they're right? So smart people will be naysayers just because, you know, they don't want to go out of a circle, and then not smart people just want to, they don't like the idea of authorities even existing. They just like, well, they're just wrong, and they just want to talk, or they'll just say parrot something they saw on TV. So there will always be naysayers, right? And that's why you obviously you don't argue with the family and everything. But what is it? Mark Twain. A man with a new idea is a crank until the idea succeeds. And I've had successful ideas. I have people call me a crank afterwards, even with proof of all this stuff. Because I have so much stuff I've done, you know, so many achievements I've done. I look like a crank even with proof in the history book. But the idea is they're going to call you crank until it succeeds, right? So I'm going to shift something that's a little bit different. Like the conclusion of that one was Scott Adams right, you know. You have to think for yourself. So what before I quit, SJV and Owen were talking about gaming the system with writing more code and stuff. And earlier I talked about embarrassing yourself and how it's better corporate policy to reward mistakes. Like they burn up the circuit board. The guy tripped and smashed a monitor off on the screen, and you mount that on a wall, right? But if someone tries to game the system and starts to just trying to self-destruct a company once every 2 weeks, you have to notice that. You do. It's called the Cobra Law. I don't know how many people know about the Cobra Law. It was a thing in India where they had too many cobras in one of their cities. I forget the city exactly. Well, so they said, well, every time you're in Cobra, we'll give you some rubles, right? Rupees. And they did. And for a while, there's less cobras. Then all of a sudden, the city was overwhelmed with cobras because there's people farming cobras. My mom did this to me before. She says, I'll give you 5 cents for every fly you kill, right? So after I killed all the flies, I opened the door. You know, you have to watch out for that. People will game the system. They want money, right? So my bad corporate policy is actually, I believe, superior to the blame game one because, you know, you get the false stuff, but you have to keep your eyes peeled. All right, I'm going to drop the conversation on. Thank you so much for Scott Adams. Free thought is really what we need in an age of World War III where ideas are how they're trying to destroy us.
All right, thanks, James. Let's go to Sergio and then SJV, and then I think we'll call close to it for today.
Oh, thank you, Owen. I forgot what I was gonna say. I completely zoned out right there, James. I almost got hypnotized. And maybe with a better microphone, it's gonna be different. But yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. But thank you, Owen, and look forward for the next one. Thank you.
All right, thanks. SJV, go ahead.
Looks like John's got her hand up. She may need to talk to. I just wanted to highlight a post in the comments. User Dominic mentioned a possible workaround for glitches. He said, if you're in a browser, minimize the browser and it works better. I have never heard that, so I just wanted to highlight that because it might be useful to somebody.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I typically, I'm always on the iPhone, so I don't use the browser stuff, but if it works better for people, that's great. And Jean, did you have something else to add before we close?
Oh, no, I'm cool. It must look like it's still up there. Thanks, though.
All right, cool. Well, that'll be it for today then. Thanks everybody for coming. I enjoyed the conversation. And we'll talk to you all again next week. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.